170 manufacturing sites across Europe, all humming under one roof, and a startup that wasn't even a Silicon Valley unicorn. In the first 12 months, the company carved a niche that the giants who thought regulatory compliance was a moat couldn't even see coming. The numbers don't lie. They moved data from private cloud straight into the hands of the factories, limiting external data flow to less than 5% of the industry average, and did it before the first quarter of year two. But that makes the results feel like a plot twist, right? It is the battle they fought. The market's language was must keep data on-prem at all cost. And I am a first-time user for this kind of communication from the giants. And I understand how it feels when an organization says that the data must keep on-prem, because I used to do that. Every prospect shared at a wall of cannot we run this on our own servers, and could only see the platform as a monolith that lived somewhere else, comforted by glittering solutions that promised one size fit all. The stakes were high. A misstep could mean a customer pulling the plug, a regulatory scandal, or losing ground to a rival with a flawless promise of compliance but no real flexibility. The company's first pound of revenue was a stepping stone, and the soft couple of thousands users were a sign that they were onto something. Yet, the pressure was relentless. Every yes was a box waiting to be stamped with their name, a label that would cut across the very core of their brand promise. Then, looking at the boardroom with a long line of agitated stakeholders, the leader decided something out of the ordinary. Instead of blasting new features from the top, they said, let's go narrow first. The team built a handful of AI-driven use cases, standalone, exponentially powerfully, ready to show a single concrete win, a single question answered on the demand. Afterwards, they took those bright spots and reframed them into a global playlist. The user's pain points were, our data must stay in our own data center. The platform's point, but if your data is in your own data center, you still get data-driven insights on a platform that never sees the data itself. They flipped the narrative. It took even months, more than 500 hours, and 2 sleepless late nights to iterate a single demo that worked with a private cloud that the most cautious customer had installed on their own hardware. The payoff? The world's newest enterprises are plugging into this platform. Vehicle manufacturers craft supply chains algorithms that read on board data from 170 sites per region without even shipping it out. Beverage giants dispatching shipments that run on local systems, yet receive global analytics. Government institutions slightly keep data on their sovereign premise while still borrowing the platform's AI muscle. Platform now pulls in 5,000 daily logs, crunching terabytes, but the user's data never leaves the private cloud it sits on. The host can't hide the excitement, and me neither. In this interview, you will hear how a distressed and dredged industry was turned on its head, how blind spots became launchpads, and how a company that was once seen as an underdog is now the benchmark for secure, flexible data integration in the regulated world. Matt, welcome to the show.
Ash, I appreciate it. It's great to be on.
Great stuff. How are you doing today?
Very good. Just joining you here from Kuala Lumpur here today. It's been a number of weeks of pretty intense travel, going into various different environments. We actually just opened up a new data server over here. To your story about underdogs, we wanted to make sure that we are present in environments where often no one else is. It's great to be on. Thank you.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you, Matt. I was really excited since we got connected. I'm myself a data person. I understand how important is data in 2026 or in this particular generation, right? We are 100% of the time surrounded by multiple data streams coming from different directions, right? So the businesses keep their data not just on the clouds, but on-prem, on computers, and everywhere. And the insights generated by this data could help them make a real life differences. I mean, one of the biggest example is Palantir, right? How do you pronounce that name, right? One of the big
Palantir,
company. Yeah. I was watching this intro video last night with my partner, and she couldn't even understand how could a company, a software company, could help somebody, you know, stop a war or understand somebody who's taking any steps towards any international or national security. So that tells me how important nowadays the integration and the data part is. Tell me more about the platform you guys have built. Where did the idea came from? What was the first stepping stone?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, overall, what you see is data has really become the lifeblood of many decisions, right? I mean, everybody always says you got to have data in order to make any form of meaningful meaningful decision. Now, with that point to point, and this is kind of like where the legacy of it really comes a little bit to a grinding halt here right now. Data used to be connected in a point-to-point scenario. So what you would have is you would have one application. This might be a CRM system where you hold customer data connected to another system that might hold, like an ERP system, for example. Then over time, new modern applications came on top of it. Let's pick e-commerce, for example, right? So you would then have an online order. That online order would have to sync to your warehouse. In fact, your entire warehouse systems would have to be changed to enable direct to consumer. You wouldn't just be shipping pallets, you'd be shipping individual items to somebody's home all of a sudden.
Mm,
So that's not just a challenge from a logistical point of view, but it's also with how that data flows. Because let's stick to that e-com example. Everyone has been to a website at some point. You can really see if you look at the more established businesses that have, you know, were probably a little bit late to the e-com party as well. You could really see, especially in the early days, how clunky that was. And that was really because there was this pressure of you have to go with the new times, and the new times were e-commerce. Now, with that, you would then have to try to make sure that your old legacy systems, which in some cases were very, very ancient, were then trying to deal with that new flood of customer information. Your customer success team, in some cases, or customer support team, in some cases, non-existent, would either have to be built but have to get access to that data, demand forecasting, et cetera, et cetera. I used to work for Whirlpool Corporation, and we had exactly that problem. Where we then wanted to really go into it and make direct to consumer a success. And to be honest, that was very challenging, especially in the beginning. Now, let's fast forward 20 years later, so to speak, and we've got kind of a similar challenge with AI. So AI is a new shiny thing on the horizon, but the problem is we need to make sure that the data, and in some cases that is data that sits on Oracle servers, which there's nothing wrong with it, but that is really gold of information that sits on these old legacy servers, for example, that will still sit there, but it needs to be made available, for example, to new AI solutions. Getting access to that at scale is actually not that difficult, but you need to make sure you've got the right environment to it. Because back to the point of point-to-point integrations that used to be there to connect many different applications with another, you really want to make sure that you're not doing that in a one-to-one scenario, but that you kind of have like a hub in the middle of it that is then
mm,
compliant to your own data standards and regional data standards on top of that as well.
got it. So when you came across this challenge, then did you, when you had this epiphany, did you looked into the market? Were there other products? What was going on at that time, and what did you see from your research that encouraged you to move ahead with the idea, or to the founder?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's always other players in any given market, right? And in fact, if it's not, then it probably shows that it's either not a validated market or anything else. But it, look, players do exist, and to be honest, very, very successfully as well. The part that was really important for us was to really focus on the niche of regulated enterprises. And on the regulatory part, you've got the unique challenge that data actually needs to sit in a certain environment, cannot leave, in many cases, a given jurisdiction. Usually that's outside of country borders. And the storage, processing, everything else ideally needs to take place within that given country. Now, this is where the traditional data integration providers are struggling often, because many times, not many times, most of the time, in fact, that processing, which can require significant resources, by the way, is done on their infrastructure. So, and that infrastructure in many cases is overseas. So, and often they've got data centers in the US and in some parts of Europe, and in Australia and maybe in Singapore as well. But they wouldn't have a specific data center I mentioned earlier, I'm in Kuala Lumpur. They wouldn't probably have one here. In fact, I know for a fact there's not many that operate centers here. They wouldn't be able to place it 100% in the UAE, for example, which has very strong data regulations. They wouldn't be able to have it 100% locally running in Hong Kong or in Thailand and so on. Basically, most would always have an international footprint of sorts. And what we're starting to see is not just in regulated environments, by the way, but across the board, there's starting to become quite a bit of pushback. Interestingly, Korea is leading the charge with this at the moment. They've recently introduced a new AI law. And that new AI law at the moment only requires companies to label outputs, so AI generated output, but it'll go as far as making companies really list and record where information has come from to train your AI and which AIs it's gone to, and basically the entire track record of all of that. That
Wow.
part is remarkably difficult, and that because of local processing that we offer, we can help ease that burden. So this goes back to finding your niche. For us, it's regulated markets.
Indeed, indeed. I was in the Oxford debate a couple of months back where we were discussing around how the explainability is not being part in US for a very long time when it comes to AI. And EU is being pioneer when it comes to AI Act. They have been drafting it, getting approvals on the sections of it. You know very well about it because you've been in the industry for so long. And I think UK is kind of like getting there in a way that they're following their footstep. US also is doing the similar kind of things. But I think explainability is one of the things when it comes to AI, which is sort of from a consumer's perspective is, in my opinion, seems to be fair to have it in the place, because then at least the consumer knows why AI is responding in this particular way or why this decision is made. I don't know if you have heard about, there is a new open source software release called Claudebot. Have you came across it?
Claude Bot.
Yeah, it's something from
Sounds like
Claude
on-prem.
Anthropic. Yeah, so it's something from one of the engineers from Anthropic. It's basically it has increased, these Mac Mini machines, the M1 processing small machines, their sales to the roof. And the reason is that you can put that Claude bot on your machine, and it's because it's open source, it has literally no governance around it, and it basically works for you 24/7 on that machine. And now people are creating virtual machines for this particular bot. So if you are hiring a social media expert, you can install this on your machine and give them instruction, and it does it for 24/7. If you are hiring for a business analyst, you just install it on a machine and it does it. So there are farms of these workers coming along in China to renting it. And that happened in last 45 days. Can you imagine that?
This is exactly, and I love this, Ash. So, I mean, it sounds like like an autonomous agent to an extent. They can, probably to some extent even, and I need to look into this further because I'm
Yeah.
personally interested now. Um, they can probably do some sort of engagements, similar to how our new browsers, whether it's from OpenAI or from the Comet browser from Perplexity, etc. I mean, there's obviously more and more happening in space. So this is exactly to the point that I was mentioning earlier, though. This is the new shiny thing, right?
Mm,
And it's great if you've got a new selected amount of agents or autonomous bots, whether it's Claude bot or anything else that might come up on the market in the future, you want to make sure that they don't just operate in isolation, but you really want to make sure that they add to the bigger picture at large. Um, the challenge here really is interconnectivity and making sure that there's, I guess, overall awareness, and I'm using awareness in quotations here because we're talking AI awareness, but nonetheless, you want to reduce the amount of hallucination as much as possible and incorrect outputs that might be resulting from incorrect inputs as well. So I'll give you one example. Actually, we've been talking to an insurer in Singapore, and they have tried to make their customer service team as profitable and automated as possible by saying, okay, any of the incoming calls that are coming in are going to be automatically transcribed. And then overall, there's a data set that then allows the team members to trust what's on the screen, read out to the customer what's there, and basically the perfect answers right up front. Sounds incredible, right? Because you don't actually need to train team members. All they got to do is read what's in front of the screen.
yeah.
It doesn't take them multiple months to get ready for any particular role anymore. Any churn that obviously happens a lot in these type of departments is kind of taken care of out of the box as well. So all of these things, in principle, all sounded very good. Now
Mm,
I'm going to spoil it. It didn't work in the end. And
mm,
why? Because it was static data that was
mm,
available, which was true at the point of, I guess, training the models, but it didn't continue updating itself because there weren't any additional integrations into it. It
mm,
wasn't learning from other conversations that other agents had. It wasn't learning from regulatory changes that have come up in one particular case. So, and as a result of it, AI is very good at giving you an answer with a confidence level that we have obviously not seen yet. So
mm,
therefore, with a strong confidence, the wrong answer was on on the agent's screens. So
mm,
guess what they were saying? The wrong stuff. And not towards any wrongdoing, but it's just, wrong data in, wrong data out. Um, and that's sort of like going back to the Claude bot here as well. This results in just an influx in additional endpoints, additional um, consumers in the end for data. So
mm,
going back to what I said earlier, when it comes to point, the average organization already, and we're talking enterprise here, has 80 different um, endpoints, 80 different enterprise systems. If you wanted to connect them all with another, you would have to connect them obviously all point to another. So that's 80 times 79. That's 6,320. We recently calculated that. I didn't do this in my head. So, but try to not just create these 6,000 connections, try to maintain them in the end. And now we're
mm,
adding a whole series of Claude bots or anything else on top of that as well. This These endpoints will completely spiral out of control to an extent in a positive way, but it's going to be unmanageable from a point-to-point scenario. So you need to make sure that a platform sits in the middle that can manage it. That's the first point. And the
mm,
second thing is going back to regulation, whether that's driven by the EU or Korea or anything else that's going to come up in the future, plus additional governance that takes place in each particular organization itself. You really need to make sure that that data gets treated with securely, so that it's available at the right place, at the right point, at the right time. but in a very secure scenario where then the CIOs have the opportunity to be 100% in control of their data.
Mhm. Indeed, indeed. And this is very interesting because you picked up this keyword multiple times in our conversation, which is compliance. I've been in industry for around 18 years now, and I see executives sitting in conference halls that the moment this keyword comes into the discussions, everybody gets a little bit, attentive, concerned, like how we are going to manage. Because either they don't understand the inside out of how it's going to work, so that's why they bring somebody external or a consultant who could help them out, or B, even though if they understand, they don't have confidence or trust on the organizations who could deliver that kind of product or services, right? How did a startup or how did a company was new in the industry were able to gain that trust? Would you be able to explain that to our listeners? Because I'm sure there are, so we have 28% of our listeners who are founders who basically have their initial seed funding sorted and they are trying to get into B2B market. But it's very hard for founders to get into the B2B space because one of the biggest challenges stabilizing trust to create that kind of personality of the product or service so that these big giants can trust them. How did you make that happen?
Yeah, look, I mean, Ash, for the most part, it comes down to control again, right? Because why do regulations exist? It's because for some reason, the outside world, whatever that looks like, can't be trusted. People and organizations are apparently are supposed to be protected from themselves, and as a result, regulatory fence gets put up, and for right or wrong reasons, but that's the reality that we live in now. um, Compliance is just one of these things where you just got to embrace it, and the beauty is just the easiest way is if you can't beat it, join it. From our point of view, is we've and architecturally speaking, we might be lucky here, but we are in the unique position that we can put the our integration platform anywhere. So IntelliIPaaS can be run everywhere, which really results in a lot of flexibility that if someone or some organization wants it to be running in a given environment in, a particular environment that is even air gapped in some cases. So we've our customers, as you mentioned in the beginning, they range from automotives to suppliers of such to government institutions to beverage manufacturers. In fact, we're talking to a very interesting large corporation in Korea at the moment who has completely different um, challenges at the moment, also compliance related, where in every case, though, you've got the same story that needs to be taken care of. And that is, where does my data go? And how can we make sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands? And here our story is always, okay, let's give the customers options. They can either run it through our environment, they can run it through their virtual, like their private cloud environment. So we've got customers that are using us completely on AWS in a private environment that are using us on Azure. We host on Azure as well, but they're using their own Azure. We've got some in an on-prem environment. Some have it completely air-gapped. So we've got one customer in a high security environment. They don't want any internet connected to it, but they still need integration automations here. So I guess the recommendation I would have when it comes to any compliance is understand what's there. How can you sort of fit into it, and how can you not just be no friction, but how can you actually help amplify that story a little bit, because that's going to make your own life a little bit easier. At least that was our experience. So being where the customer is, being where the compliance needs to be.
Is there a particular example? And I don't want to share. I don't want you to share any names or any, anything, so any numbers which you are not able to because of the NDAs. Would you be able to share any example with our listeners around where you have taken an organization from A to B, keeping the compliance requirements, but also demonstrating the transformation and how they have utilized the platform in order to get what they want?
Yeah, I'll give an example out of Europe, in the space of car part manufacturing. So this is a little bit narrow here, but anyways, this particular organization uses the platform in quite a few interesting ways. One for supplier management, and that's the part I'm going to be talking about, but many other things as well. And these range from IT service management scenarios to supply chain parts to now in this case managing third-party suppliers. So when it comes to the one on the regulatory side, you want to make sure that obviously just-in-time deliveries and all these logistical issues are being taken care of. That's one part that's quite important. The other thing here was that basically making the connections to third-party systems, and most of these times these were ERP systems, making them as standardized as possible. And that's really allowed them to spend less time on onboarding new partners. So they need partners for all sorts of reasons. They need magnet suppliers to create electric motors. They need little pumps, for example, for injection systems and so on. Like they need hoses, they need semiconductors, they need a vast array of different parts to then ultimately create car parts. Um, yeah, and again, 170 manufacturing sites all over Europe for them. So you would have lots of different local manufacturers in some cases, and you'd have some foreign ones as well. But spending less time on administrative burdens, I would rather say in this case, and making sure that you also stay independent from ransom. And I mean this in a positive way by saying the easier it is to, as an organization, the more flexible you are when it comes to either replacing a software vendor or in some cases a partner as well, the more opportunity you have to create a product that is very much cost effective on the market. And in some cases, scenarios have come up where suppliers thought that they were very, very well integrated into that particular business that we're working with. And it turns out that they were literally just the supplier for a certain ingredient, so to speak. And as a result, it our customer was not being taken at ransom here, which is helpful for them. You can kind of argue both ways when it comes to an integration platform, by the way. So from a customer side, what we often do is, because we're really an integration, like at the heart of an integration, really. So lots of different endpoints are coming in, and then we just send the data from any source to any target system. We don't store data. That allows an application to be replaced quite easily. So, if you've got one CRM system that you're using today and you wanted to change it to another one, really all you have to do is change that connector, which is quite straightforward. Now, on the flip side, we're sometimes, in fact, quite often working with technology companies. And here it's actually the opposite argument, because here we can help technologies really be at the center of that universe. Because depending on how you structure it architecturally, from a customer side, we can connect to basically the entire ecosystem around it. However, when we're talking to the technology vendors, and there's one, we're talking, in fact, a few of them, but one particular one quite exciting in the United States right now, they have a lot of, basically they want their product to become as sticky as possible. They want external integration to become as frictionless as possible,
Mm.
because suddenly then for them it's kind of like the opposite argument. They are then suddenly connected to very many applications at large, and then their product becomes extremely sticky. So if you're saying that you've got a lot of founders on the pod, the recommendation I would have for any founder, especially in the tech space, is make sure that your product becomes as sticky as possible as early as possible, because then it becomes very difficult to rip and replace. Now, you can get there by hiring a lot of integration experts that help you with that, or you can go down a platform approach. But either way, that can result in a lot of stickiness there. So on the one side, you don't want to be taking it ransom. On the other side, you want to make sure that your product becomes as sticky as possible. So yeah, that's certainly in both cases where integration can help.
Indeed. And we all know when it comes to integration, how important it is to have not just the flexibility on the platform where you can update, change, or maintain the way things are changing. I would say every 6 months for the organizations with, you know, multi-million dollar business revenue models, or for startups every 6 weeks. And it's just changing very, very quickly, right? Great stuff. Matt, I think the conversation is so interesting. I could just keep go on and on, but I think I always try to connect with my guest on a personal level, and our listeners also want to know more about your personal journey. Um, would you be able to? I'm eager to learn more about you. Right? Can you take us back to your roots and share with our listeners about your upbringing, your childhood? How did your early experiences shaped your journey and eventually led you to become a visionary entrepreneur you're today? And were there any key influences from your family or surrounding that played a significant role in shaping your entrepreneurial spirit? We have all read about this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad. We always had this uncle, a friend's dad who was there, who had all the spicy, nice looking cars, big house, and then we always wanted to learn from this person. Were there somebody like that in your childhood who were very inspiring to you, who helped you out?
Yeah, look, clearly many people across the many years have resulted in various different ways of inspiration. I was born in Germany, in Hamburg, which naturally makes me a hamburger. People from Hamburg are called hamburgers. Anyways, was brought up there. My family still lives there. I had my first international experience when I was 11, and
Hmm.
that really changed my initial perspective of the world. So I was part of an organization called CISV, the Children's International Summer Villages, and I had the opportunity to spend 4 weeks in what was called a children's camp. So basically, I think it was like 30 different delegations from 30 different countries came to Canada, British Columbia,
Oh,
and we were literally living for these 4 weeks in a school camp kind of scenario. It was a lot of fun. I didn't speak any English. It was a uh, case of getting to know the world without actually knowing what it's like, yeah. Anyways, so that completely formed, I would say, the majority of my childhood. Obviously went back to Germany and eventually left Germany at age 16, where I was moving to New Zealand. Um, Finished school over there, very much had the support of my parents, otherwise it wouldn't work. So I didn't leave home because it was terrible. I left home because I was given the opportunity. And New Zealand really gave me a lot of opportunities there, to be honest. Like, I learned to speak English. I had a really good local circle of friends. Um, with many I'm still in touch with today. Then did an international business degree. Among others, I went to Victoria University in Wellington. Always wanted to have a European degree, though, so went back to Europe for a bit. Among that, I also had some time in the United States. I studied at Hawaii Pacific University. Eventually went to Sydney, Australia, did my MBA over there. Anyways, like, the rest is kind of history from there. I'm now spending most of my time in Asia. So I've lived in 6 countries at the moment officially. And, yeah, so that's kind of like my upbringing around it. When it comes to people that have inspired me, various different people in various different stages, right? So
Right.
obviously in the beginning, my parents, both of them who both have their own businesses, very, very different, nothing related to technology.
Mm.
My mom on the legal side, my dad on, he's an interior designer, and yeah, he's been yeah, quite successful in that space actually. So they've done really well for themselves. So to an extent, that was it was nice to have that level of I guess family support as well, which obviously goes a long way.
Mm.
Um, but I always knew, like, I was always inspired by the things I didn't know, by the unknown. And yeah, like back to the upbringing, and you ask, what's the entire story around it? It was always trying to do the things that just weren't really common. Like, it wasn't common to go to Canada at 11 and spent 4 weeks there. It
Yeah.
wasn't common
Yeah.
to leave Germany at age 16, not really speaking English very well, and moving to literally the other side of the world,
Mm.
to New Zealand, plus then not coming back, and kind of like staying overseas and so on, right? So all these things weren't common. My parents have certainly inspired me. Bosses of certain have inspired me. Lecturers obviously have. Some podcasters have, and and even Casey Neistat has. So he's had this saying and this kind of like has always been a little bit of a summary. He's a YouTuber. He
Mm.
always said, "Do what you can't," and that's something I've sort of lived by for quite a while. So I hope Casey is listening. It's
There you
yeah, now that's this sort of do what you can is really something that I would encourage people to do. And try to do the things that you can't. There's going to be a lot of people, including yourself, of telling you that you can't do many things, and things are certainly not easy. I can tell you that. But in the end, if you stick to it, yeah, everyone's a master
go.
of their own universe.
Yeah, yeah. And Matt, before wrapping up, before going to our six quick fire question round, I wanted to ask you something personal. Throughout your journey and experience, there must have been valuable lessons learned, right? If you don't mind sharing, could you reflect on your experiences and tell us about one mistake or setback that you experienced or encountered along the way that you now consider not a regret, but a lessons learned, life lessons learned? And additionally, what advice would you give our listeners based on that particular experience?
Well, there's no shortage of mistakes that I've made, and it's kind of hard to pick one, to be honest, because things can go wrong all the time, but you go and learn out of it. I'll give you a business story, one related to a former business that really didn't go well at all in the end. Like, it went fantastically well back in Australia, but then things turned because ultimately there was overexposure on one particular individual. That person was external, and in the end, it probably wasn't adequately assessed well enough as a risk at the time. So clearly not mentioning any names here, but anyways, it's the biggest lesson that really came out of that was someone can always derail you. It's
Mm.
about managing these risks and maybe actually getting comfortable with them as well. Because, yes, we've all done our probability analysis and how likely is it that this and this happened. By the way, that wasn't a strong probability because that person was seemingly invested as well and shouldn't have derailed it. But look, so be it. The biggest lesson that came out of that in hindsight is trust your gut, because there's many things that people say, there's many things that people seemingly do. There is, anything from memorandums of understandings to contracts to whatever else. Often
Mm.
they're not worth the paper they're written on. So there is no good deal that you can do with a bad person, but there's plenty of good deals you can often obviously do with good people. So just my recommendation or my biggest lesson for myself is I don't like if I've got a bad feeling about something, I voice it up front. So the I used to take this in because I'm thinking, well, rationally speaking, all these things look good. Why am
Mm.
I having that feeling? Let's just ignore that feeling. So right now I go about it and just say, no, if you have that feeling, you want to voice it,
Mm.
because ideally you're wrong. And there was recently a scenario with another partner. I had feelings where wasn't 100% sure, and I did raise them, and I raised them exactly the way I thought about them. And
Mm.
his response was, Matt, you usually analyze things very well. You usually get them right. In this case, you're completely wrong. And
Mm.
that's something you need to hear as well when you're wrong. So, and
Yeah.
then how I go about it is I then say, look, I apologize. And I did. And to be honest, it's an embarrassing moment if you get it wrong, right? So you might feel good about yourself if you get it right, but you have to then be honest with yourself when you get these things wrong.
Indeed.
So we apologize. We're still great partners. I would consider him a friend. It's and yeah, you just got to stay true to yourself. Voice whatever concerns you have with other people, especially partners, and usually something good comes out of it. And if it doesn't, well, then, and if, that very conversation I just referred to in the end that ended up being good, if that would have been a difficult conversation, well, then that you might be on the path of destruction if you were to continue with that relationship. In this
Yeah.
case here, I'm very glad that I've had the conversation, and I'm very glad that we're continuing to go down the path of joint partnership, which is nice as well.
Indeed, indeed. And I couldn't agree more with you on this. Thanks for sharing that. And having a business partner is nowhere less than anything than having a life partner. You have to understand that whatever decisions you're making today, it's going to affect your organization, your company later at some stage. And I talk about it. I have interviewed more than 150 entrepreneurs like yourself, and I talk about it in almost every episode, that how important is the partnership, or finding a co-founder in your business. Great stuff. Okay, we should wrap up now. We are going to go into the lightning round. I've got 6 quick fire questions for you. If you don't want to answer any of them, just give me a skip and then we can move to the next one. How's that sound?
Sure, sure.
Great stuff. What are the top 3 strategies for executives in the industries to understand how how choosing a right data integration partner could affect their future? So what 3 strategies they should be using in order to um, procure a data integration partner in 2026?
So the most important bit here is really understanding for yourself like define your outcome and work backwards. Is probably my recommendation here. So if you have, in fact, start with a customer in mind. Really become very customer centric in terms of
Mm.
what you want to achieve, and then work backwards from that. A couple of people obviously got that very right, Steve Jobs being one of them. And I think if you put yourself in the shoes of the customer, that very quickly gives you all the clarity you probably need.
Mm.
Data integration in the end is just like data integration is no different than plumbing.
Mm.
So if you're building your house, you've got a very concrete plan of where you want your bathroom to be, where you want the pool to be, where you want the kitchen to be, etc. The data going into these places and out of these places in real time is no different to the water going in and out of these places. When you want to open the tap, the experience for the customer, you in this case, if you're using it, is that water better be flowing instantly in real time.
Mm.
So that's ultimately one endpoint, one unique application that you're connecting with, right? When you're pressing the toilet flush button, that water better be disappearing in real time. And again, here, it's basically triggers in both cases that result in a certain data operation going to and from. There's various different models and various different ways that can get you there. Our model with IntelliIPaaS is really focused on the global deployment flexibility. That's not needed for everybody. So, in some cases, you don't need a platform that can run on your own environment. I would highly recommend it simply because you are in control of that data end to end, and that if something were to go down elsewhere, you're not affected by that, especially for mid-size, lower enterprises. That's important. But you just want to make sure that what again, become very customer centric and sort of like make sure that your architecture underneath it really aligns to that is probably my biggest recommendation.
Got it. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
When you're saying what to recommend, you mean
What
which
book?
systems? What
No,
book? I'm
what
sorry.
book? Yeah.
What book?
Sorry.
Good question. You know what? Title: Co-Intelligence: Living and Working with AI was a good one.
Mm.
Um, Ethan Molling, if I'm not mistaken. I think Molling. Anyways, the book is basically just about, it's kind of like a guide to, navigating the sudden arrival of Gen AI and really understanding how we can, kind of like live with it as a coexistence as well. So there's still a lot of people, maybe not as much this audience, but still, especially in enterprise conversations we're having, there's still a lot of people that are very much afraid of that. AI, I mean, we've all seen the same, uh, highlights when it comes to news, AI taking jobs, and so on and so forth. AI is not taking your job. It's the person who understands AI is going to take your job. And it's a little similar to, the Industrial Revolution back then, or people saying it's counterproductive for everybody to be able to read. Some say not everyone should have access to AI. Well, it turns out in hindsight, it was great that everybody was able to read. So we will have additional confronting conversations when it comes to it, and it's good that regulations are being put in place for some governance there as well. That kind of brings us back to some of the earlier topics in terms of what you can and what you can't do with it. I think that's good, and that's probably a podcast on its own. But what we, from that book, Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI, I think it was, it's a highly, AI is a highly capable intern that you can frame and you can mold the way you want it to be. So
Yeah.
I hope that that is how people are going to be using it going forward as well.
Great. So, what one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
Every founder has had the same issue, right? There's a few exemptions, but for the most part, things are never as easy as you want it to be, and you just have to continue believing in what you're doing. And there's plenty of people always trying to prove you wrong. There's obviously the market that can go into various different ways. Not just from a technological perspective. We said earlier with Claudebot coming, up in the last couple of weeks, and other sort of AI tools coming up. It's also market conditions that can suddenly shift altogether. I mean, we've recently seen a lot of different volatility when it comes to, hype or not hype. If it comes to AI, for example, is this the next .com, etc. So personally, I think we're in a good space here because we just connect the data, and as a result of it, that helps fuel other AI tools, and it helps make better business decisions over time. But obviously there's many founders are having very confronting moments from time to time. And it's just believing in your story, believing in the people around you, and making sure you've got good people around you to help support your mission. I think that's probably one of the most important bits. So you're the product of the around 5 people that you spend time with. So these better be good
Indeed.
people. And the ones that result in uplifting, positive conversations as well, and not the ones that are getting you down.
Yeah. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
Okay, so I've developed a little planner for myself, which I call the Matt Focus Planner. It basically consists of 10 annual goals, no more than 10. Um, them broken down into how am I tackling them throughout each particular quarter, and ultimately it just breaks down from year to quarter to month to week to day. And every day I review my annual goals and I religiously really update the percentage on how far I'm getting. In some cases, there's no, you know, marginal increase in terms of where you're heading. But as you're looking back, you then get to see for yourself pretty well. And first of all, you get a daily reminder of what's important while you're getting up in the morning. The second thing is you're going to be able to look back pretty quickly to see why or how far you've actually come, especially when when you kind of feel a little bit lost in terms of one or two initiatives that you're trying to push forward. And these plans can change, right? I mean, I've had plenty of goals on there that are ultimately no longer required, and others are taking place instead. But then just comes down to prioritization as well. What's more important? What's less important? So yeah, for me, it's just this daily, monthly, yearly planner that I've been running for multiple years.
Great stuff. Um, what's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had time?
I'm all about connecting people. So see, people, I travel a lot for work, and I love traveling privately as well. So one thing I would love is if there was more communities that are, uh, I guess, acknowledging really that type of lifestyle, which, can seem very flattering from the outside. I'm in various different countries. Basically, every time I'm talking to partners and customers and something else, the first question is always, Matt, where are you? In fact, for a period of time in my signature, I had a part in there that says current time zone and then whatever that is, and that was frequently changing. Um, Now, with that, it's I would love to see more communities around that, which is a little difficult because people are all over the place all over the time, right? But I don't, at least I'm not aware of one community that really just focuses exactly on that. Where I know I'm in whatever in Berlin, for example, in a couple of weeks' time, or in Sydney in a few weeks' time, and then I can kind of like say in advance, hey, I'm going to be there, and it turns out other people happen to be there as well. I think that would be a cool thing, and then everybody goes into their own sort of little worlds. These would be I usually meet these people in hotel lobbies or at airport lounges, but it'll be good if there was more of a, let's say, digital community around.
Well, nobody's stopping you to create one, as you have mentioned. So why don't you go? You can utilize oddcircles.com, where you can create free community
Yeah,
and, spread the word. Maybe you will have more
that's
members.
true. That's true.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And the last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, my usual game here is try to guess how many countries I've lived in and or where I'm from. So I have to think about that. Um, it's
Or maybe
I
what's
don't.
one of your most important passion outside the work?
My passion again is connecting with people, but
Mm.
I think going back to your other question, um, yeah, actually, maybe let's talk about the passions.
Yeah,
The other one I might have to send you an email on, but
sure.
the I tend to be fairly open in terms of what I do, so that's why I was probably struggling a little bit with that previous question. Um, so I like connecting with lots of different people. I love being engaged and deeply engaged actually in cultures, and when I'm traveling to certain countries, rather than just being there for a day or two. I like spending as much time as I possibly can. Recent example was Laos. So it was actually never on my list. Turns out I almost spent, I think we were like 3 weeks or so there in various parts. And that helped me sort of like get closer connected to, that culture and that way of life a little bit more, and also some of the challenges they're having. Some of that even being related from, post Vietnam War times, where I actually didn't know Laos at some point was the most heavily bombed country in the world by
Mm,
capita. So yeah, and especially still towards the south, kind of like that corridor towards Ho Chi Minh City is still, up until today, they're still struggling with, especially aftermath of cluster bombs. Anyway, so these are all little things that I probably wouldn't have come across if I wouldn't have, spent a little bit more time there, and had some curiosity to understand that as well. Um,
yeah.
so, but yeah, out of that, new different ideas came, which, to the point before, I like to be focused on what I want to do, if possible. I've got lots of little sort of ideas, but yeah, IntelliIPAS is certainly a big focus of mine.
Great stuff. Matt, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story, unpacking years of building this business and some of the ups and downs you've faced. If people want to get in touch with you, people want to learn more about the platform, the services you're providing, what's the best way to do it?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, of course, Matt Soltau. There's not too many. Soltau is spelled with an S. It happens to be actually a German city with what was once upon a time the world's largest wooden roller coaster. But anyways, head to intelliipas.io, where you can see plenty of different use cases, adapters we've built, our deployment models, and yeah. We've got some good blog articles as well that are coming out on a regular basis. So hopefully there's one or two things on there that you might.
Great stuff. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work you're doing. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Ash.